Section 1 of Al-Ajurrumiieh, the Arabic text with the vowels and an English translation. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Recording by Abdu'lláh. Al-Ajurrumiieh, the Arabic text with the vowels and an English translation by Abu Abdillah Muḥammad ibn Ajurrum as-Sinhaji, translated by James Perowne. Section 1, Chapters 1 to 8. 1. Chapter on the sentence. A sentence is a compound expression which adequately conveys our meaning. It consists of three parts: the noun, the verb, and the particle which has a signification. The noun is known by khafd, the inflection of the genitive, by tanween, and by the addition of the article. The particles of khafd are min, ila, an, ala, fi, rubba, ba, kaf, lam, and the particles of adjuration, namely waw, ba, and ta. The verb is known by qad, sin, and sawfa, and the quiescent ta of the feminine gender. The particle is a word to which neither the sign of the noun nor that of the verb applies. 2. Chapter on inflection and its parts. Inflection is the change of the last syllable of words according to the difference of the words which expressly or virtually govern them. The parts of inflection are four: raf', nasb, khafd, and jazm. Note, the terms raf' and nasb applied to nouns denote respectively the nominative and accusative, as khafd does the genitive. When applied to verbs, they refer respectively to the indicative and subjunctive moods, as jazm does to the conditional. See Shire's Grammar, page 213. Endnote. Of these, raf', nasb, and khafd belong to nouns, which are not susceptible of jazm, and of the same, raf', nasb, and jazm are peculiar to verbs, which do not admit khafd. 3. Chapter on the knowledge of the signs of inflection. Raf' has four signs: dhamma, waw, alif, and noon. Dhamma is the sign of raf' in four cases: in the singular of the noun, in the irregular plural, in the regular feminine plural, and in the aorist of the verb, when no addition is made to its termination. Waw is the sign of raf' in two cases: in the regular plural masculine, and in the five following words: abuka, akhuka, hamuka, fuka, and dhu malin. Alif is the sign of raf' exclusively in the dual of nouns. Noon is the sign of raf' in the aorist of the verb, when there is added to it the pronoun of the dual, or the pronoun of the plural, or the pronoun of the second person feminine singular. Nasb has five signs: fatha, alif, kasra, ya, and the apocope of noon. Fatha is the sign of nasb in three cases: in the singular of the noun, in the irregular plural, and in the aorist of the verb, when nothing is added to its termination, and when it is under the influence of a nasb governing word. Alif is the sign of a nasb in the 5 nouns. For example, رَأَيْتُ أَبَاكَ وَأَخَاكَ, and the like. Kasra is the sign of nasb in the regular plural feminine. Ya is the sign of nasb in the dual and plural. The apocope of noon is the sign of nasb in verbs whose raf' is determined by noon. Khafd has 3 signs: kasra, ya, and fatha. Kasra is the sign of khafd in 3 cases: in the declinable noun singular, in the irregular declinable plural, and in the regular plural feminine. Ya is the sign of khafd in 3 cases: in the 5 nouns, in the dual, and in the plural. Fatha is the sign of khafd in the noun which is indeclinable. Jazm has 2 signs: sukun and apocope. Sukun is the sign of jazm in the aorist of the verb whose termination is regular. Apocope is the sign of jazm in the aorist whose termination is irregular, and in verbs whose raf' is determined by noon. 4. Chapter on the inflected words. The inflected words are of 2 classes. One class is inflected with vowels, and the other with consonants. Those which are inflected with vowels are of 4 kinds: the noun singular, the irregular plural, the regular plural feminine, and the aorist of the verb, which has nothing added to its termination. All these words are characterized in raf' by dhammah, in nasb by fatha, in khafd by kasra, and are jazmated with sukun. To these there are 3 cases of exceptions: the regular plural feminine, which in nasb has kasra; the indeclinable noun, which in khafd has fatha; and the aorist of the verb, irregular in the last syllable, which is jazmated by the apocope of the final syllable. Those words which are inflected with consonants are of 4 kinds: the dual, the regular plural masculine, the 5 nouns, and the 5 following verbal forms, namely يفعلان, تفعلان, يفعلون, تفعلون, تفعلين. The dual is characterized in raf' by alif, and in khafd and nasb by ya. The regular plural masculine has waw in the nominative and ya in the accusative and genitive. The 5 nouns have waw in the nominative, alif in the accusative, and ya in the genitive. The 5 verbal forms are characterized in raf' by noon, and in nasb and jazm by the apocope of the same letter. 5. Chapter on the verbs. Verbs have 3 tenses: the madi, preterite, the mudari', aorist, and the amr, imperative. Thus, idrab, yadribu, darb. The preterite has always a fatha in the last syllable, the imperative always jazm. The aorist is the form which commences with one of the 4 servile letters comprised in the technical word anaitu, and it is always in raf', except when it is influenced by a word governing nasb or jazm. The particles which govern nasb are 10, namely an, len, idha, kay, likay, lamu kay, and the lam of negation, hatta, and the corresponding particles, that is, those which introduce the apodosis, fa, waw, and aw. The particles which are followed by jazm are 18, namely lem, lemma, alem, alemma, the lam of command and entreaty, la in forbidding and entreating, in, ma, man, mahma, idma, ayyun, mata, ayyana, ayna, anni, haythuma, kayfama, and either in poetry. 6. Chapter on the nouns in raf. The nouns in raf are of 7 kinds, namely the agent and the patient whose agent is not named, the subject and its predicate, the subject of kunna, and the analogous verbs, the predicate of inna and the analogous particles, and the word in apposition with the raf'ated form, which is of 4 kinds, namely adjective, conjunctive, corroborative, and permutative. 7. Chapter on the agent. The agent is the noun in raf' whose action is previously mentioned. It is of 2 kinds, when the agent is expressed and when it is contained in the verb, literally open and concealed. The agent is expressed when one says qama zaydun, stetit zayd, etc. It is implied when one says darabtu, werberawi. 8. Chapter on the patient whose agent is not named. This is the noun in raf' whose agent is not expressed with it. When the verb is in the preterite, the first syllable has dhamma and the penultimate kasra. But when the verb is in the aorist, the first syllable has dhamma and the penultimate fatha. The patient is of 2 kinds, expressed and contained in the verb. It is expressed when one says ضُرِبَ زَيْد, verbratus est Zayd, etc. It is implied when one says ضربت, verbratusum, etc. and the like. End of section 1. Recording by Abu Jalal. Recorded in Oxford, England.